Hi, I'm Dr. Jason Wagner with Sarasota Vascular Specialists. I'm here for another Whiteboard Wednesday. Today we're going to talk about dialysis access, particularly hemodialysis, and specifically the difference between a fistula and a graft and how we make them happen. So here I have a really nice fancy drawing of an arm. Particularly, I'm looking at the artery, that's in red, and then the veins, those are in blue. When it comes to our blood flow to the arm and from the arm, we have the arteries that bring the high pressure oxygenated blood down to the hand and all the muscles and the tissues. And then we have the veins that bring everything back to the heart. With hemodialysis, what we need to do is create a connection between the artery side and the vein side to have more flow going through a vein to get blood to help dilate that vein up, have it be a high flow, low resistance system. As that vein gets big under the skin, it then matures and gets strong to the point where they can access it with 2 needles on dialysis. One's gonna bring blood to the machine, and the other's gonna bring it from the machine, the clean blood, back into the body to then go to the heart and get back into the circulation. So I need to find a way to connect an artery to a vein. The arteries to the arm, you have the subclavian artery that then becomes the axillary artery, and then we really kind of get out of the chest and into the arm, and that's where we get the brachial artery. The brachial artery is in the upper arm to about the level of the elbow. Just below the elbow, right about here, it usually splits into what's called the radial artery that goes down towards the thumb side of the arm, or the ulnar artery that goes down towards the pinky side. They connect usually in a loop in the arch of the hand. The same, very similar anatomies down in the legs as well. Some people, about 25% of folks, will have actually that bifurcation, that splitting of the brachial artery will actually happen much higher up in the chest, and we'll find that in advance on ultrasound. It doesn't mean we can't do a fistula or a graft, it just helps us better plan for where we're gonna make our connections. So with regards to the veins that come out of the hand and out of the arm, we really care about the superficial veins for a fistula. That means the veins that are above the level of the muscles that are above the level of the fascia. The fascia is the strong stuff that kind of holds the muscles in place. Down at the wrist was a cephalic vein that runs along the top part of the arm on the thumb side to about the level of the antecubital fossa or the elbow joint. That vein then continues up to the shoulder. That's this vein here coming up along the top. That's a great vein for a fistula. That's usually our first choice vein. We'll want to make a connection down here at the wrist if we can. So if the vein's a good enough size, meaning 2.5 millimeters or bigger, we can sew the vein onto the radial artery. So it's a radial artery to cephalic vein fistula or a radiocephalic fistula. And that's the first choice because it's the furthest down the arm. It has the lowest probability of taking blood flow away from the hand because it's down in a smaller artery. And as that vein grows and matures, and as that fistula keeps humming along, it's actually maturing and helping slowly grow all of the veins higher up in the arm. If that vein's not any good, that's okay. We'll look at the cephalic vein higher up in the arm because we can always access up here if we need to. And so for that, we would make a small cut in the vein and sew it onto the brachial artery or the radial artery right here, in the elbow. That's a small incision, about an inch, 1.5 inches long. Very minimal. We do it in about an hour or so, and then you come and go from the hospital the same day to do that procedure. If that vein's not very good, that's also okay because you have the basilic vein. That's the third kind of, superficial vein. It actually gets a little deep in the upper arm, and so what we end up doing, that's this vein that runs along the middle here, what we end up doing is making first a surgery to make a tiny little, about a 1-inch incision and connect the vein to the artery. That vein then grows under the skin in its normal position for about a month. And then we do a second surgery, we make an incision up the arm, we take down all the branches from that vein and we bring it up to the surface. Usually about 3 weeks after we do that second stage of the procedure, it can start being used for dialysis. If you don't have any good veins in the arm, that's okay. The superficial veins, meaning like the cephalic or the basilic, it's not the end of things. It just means we have to use an artificial vein. So that's what's called a graft. And so sometimes we'll make a connection between the arteries down in the forearm and a vein in the forearm and do what's called like a loop configuration down here. Other times we'll make a connection from the artery just above the elbow joint to a deeper vein higher up here, and that will be kind of tunneled right under the skin in a very similar location that we'd normally be accessing a fistula. The benefit of a fistula is it's your own natural tissues. It can't really get infected because it's your own natural vein. They have a really good long-term patency rate, which means they stay open for a very long period of time without requiring a lot of intervention to help make it stay open. The downside of a fistula is it takes a little bit more work to get it up and running, and it takes a little bit longer for the vein to grow and mature. A graft is really great, especially if it's your only option. The benefit of a graft is about 3 weeks after we put it in, you can actually start using it or cannulating it for dialysis, which means if you're stuck with a tunneled catheter temporarily as an alternative means of dialysis, you get to get that out sooner. The downside of the graft is it is something artificial. It's made of Gore-Tex. It's an artificial plastic-like material, and that can theoretically get infected. It's relatively rare, but if that does happen, then we have to take out the graft. Other benefit of the graft is that we can really tunnel in exactly the location we need to be. So some people that have shoulder mobility issues, we can tunnel the graft further lateral in the arm to help make it easier for people at the dialysis unit to cannulate it. It's also a little bit easier to feel and poke for some dialysis nurses than, say, a fistula is. The other downside of a graft is that even though it's really easy to get up and running early on, long term, it's a little bit harder to keep open. Grafts don't stay open as long or as well as fistulas, but that's okay. We pay attention to that with ultrasound, and if we see that you're having problems on dialysis, or if we see that there's lower flow through the graft or there's an outflow narrowing that we need to deal with, and in literally a couple minutes in a minimally invasive procedure in our outpatient center, we can poke into it, get a wire through that narrowing and balloon it open, help maintain patency or keep it open. If, God forbid, it shuts down, not the end of the world. We can usually go in with 2 small needle pokes, get all the clot out of it, balloon or treat whatever the causative lesion is, or whatever's causing that thing to shut down, fix that problem and get the graft up and running. Long and short of it is, you need a vein, you need an artery, and we need to make a connection. We need the vein or something to replace the vein, in this case a graft, to be able to provide an access for them to access with 2 needles for dialysis. We'll ideally try and stay as far down in the arm as possible because we can always go up the arm, but once we've made a cut here, I can't go back to the vein down here at the wrist because the outflow is blocked. And so we'll start ideally down at the wrist with a fistula, then move up the arm with 2 other fistula options. And then as a last resort of choice, we'd go to the graft. And then if all of that eventually gets worn out, we still have the entire other extremity and then other options thereafter. So I'm Dr. Jason Wagner. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me for a Whiteboard Wednesday on hemodialysis access creation.